This is Derek. Welcome to the Dialogues with Derek podcast. Joining me today is none other than Neil DeGraide of the band Dirt Poor Robins. He joined me earlier in the year to talk about music symbolism and theory, some really cool things about how music presents reality, as well as the four elements of music and how melody matters and the difference between melody and a hook. But today I invited him back so we could talk about more practical things, about how he takes a song at the idea or intuitive level and turns it into a thing, into a song. And then step two, how he takes that song and then distributes it and markets it to where it reaches the people that need to hear it. I'm very grateful to Neil, who allowed us to see behind the scenes or revealed some of his secrets as to how he produces the content that he does. We take a deeper look into his new single, Anthem to the Edge of the World. Be sure to check that out, as well as his new compilation album, which is going to be released May 18th. Some other really cool things that he will get into in more detail is ideas of being rare, not cool, gamifying. Neil also reflects on his career and the progression of being a full-time musician, producer, also was a part-time musician, having been signed with record labels, and then also with Dirt Poor Robins, being totally self-published, no record labels or anything. So he explains some of that process, as well as some of the key features and advice that he would give to people that are making creative content today. Enjoy.
Dude, I'm so glad you started with dude. Okay, let's try that again. Oh man, I'm so glad to be here. I've been watching your channel a bunch. I really appreciate you as an interviewer. I think you do a great job of framing in the conversation, and you also seem to have the ability to track with what other people are saying very quickly, even if it's new or novel. You're able to integrate it and jump off, and so I've really liked that about your channel. So I wanted to start out by letting you know that I've enjoyed the channel, and I'm delighted to be on it. I'm in honored company with your other videos and other guests. So I actually reached out to you this time. And I was like, hey, listen, I want to talk again. I really liked talking last time. And I've got, I mean, this is the problem when you're an artist, is like you have to apply your artistry into marketing. So I have new projects I need to talk about. So hopefully we get to jumping in and talking about a few of those things as I go along, as well as whatever else we're going to talk about.
Yeah, let's start there. So just why don't you just announce all the different things that you have going on, things that are about to be published, things that are already published. You've been pretty active so far in 2021, so why don't you let us know?
Well, I've been so busy. Well, so I'm sitting in this, I built this studio into an RV, which was, I mean, a long story, but man, what a great decision. I love this thing. So I'm in Kentucky working in an RV, so that ought to give you an image of what I'm doing here. Beard just got a little more ZZ Top. So, yeah, so for one, May 18th, we've got a compilation record coming out with a new single. It's called Anthems to the Edge of the World. So one of the things we've done is we look back at the work we've done so far, and our tracks that were the most popular, and we sorted them out. And it's basically people voted for this in a strange way by playing our tracks a lot. So all the tracks that got played the most over our discography, we've put on this one record. And I've done some remixes of the oldest stuff. And just to kind of get them up to speed, not like a weird George Lucas remake where I totally remake the songs and now people are mad that I've got a new Jabba the Hutt in it. Man,
I was just rewatching Return of the Jedi, and it's like, that's not the original song.
No, it's sad. I kind of want to watch the original one still. So all of our original versions will still exist, and they're not that much different. It's just going to sound a little more up to date. So. Yeah, so basically, I think it's a really good record to get to know us if you don't know us, because, man, the theme. So we named it Anthems to the Edge of the World because our band is pretty apocalyptic. We didn't mean it to be that way. Yeah, it's just kind of what gets us excited when you sit down to write, or you're trying to come up with a story for a concept record. It just feels like it's kind of like the end of something right now. And so there just was always a lot of synergy about these stories that have to do with the edge, or the when things flip over, or they become a new thing, or something dies. So we've got a real apocalyptic theme to our band. And looking back, we're like, oh my gosh, yeah, this is it. So we actually wrote a song called Anthem to the Edge of the World. It's just kind of like a meta Dirt Poor Robin song. It's about the everyday struggles we have to stay human, like to actually understand our nature, to not get sucked into this pleasure pattern of the technologically driven world, to not fill our lives with distractions, but to find true beauty so we can endure the suffering that is inevitable. So that's our new project. It's very cinematic. I mean, we refer to ourselves as cinematic rock, and we can't really find a great category that fits. And I don't even know if that's a legitimate category, but there's something about it that has a soundtrack quality to our songs, or it seems to have a movie-esque element. It seems like it would fit well in that setting. So we've got that going. Okay, so I've got a book called The Three Golden Ropes. It's a fairy tale / allegory. It's a very short book. The artwork was done by Chad Nuss, who does the Silence comics, and he knocked it out of the park. I love it. I mean, I just look at the art. I don't even read the story anymore. So I haven't published anything like that before. It just came to me. Chad and I collaborated, and there it is. It's up and available. You can go to dirtpoorrobins.com to find it. And let's see what else we're doing. Middle of next week, probably by the time you watch this, we'll be already in production. We're producing a film called Queen of the Night. And again, if you follow us, you can follow the film. Jonathan Peugeot, who people on your channel might be familiar with, helped create the story. And Queen of the Night is happening. So it's a silent film that we're making our record after this to the film. So our new record will be the soundtrack to the film. And it's a story drenched in symbolism. I mean, on every level and every point, from the geographical layout of the city that it takes place in, to the character types, and even to what they wear and the gods they encounter. So it's definitely a fairy tale that takes place in semi-modern times. It takes place in the 1920s. And you can figure out the rest for yourself. So part of what we do with Dirt Poor Robins and everything I do, I gamify things a little bit, is that I'll give people a clue into what we're talking about it. Yeah, but I always let people hunt down. So I always try to put more and more layers in our stories and our songs and whatever we're doing than will be obvious on your first listen. So we've got some hooks up front for people. And then we, they kind of lure them in. And then the more you dig in, the more layers you find in our art, hopefully. So I've got that going on. And I mean, that's about all I'll talk about right now. There's too many things to talk about, but we're working into becoming a production company where we make more films after this. Wow. So cool. I mean, it's been busy. So I'm making a film and a record at the same time, and a new podcast, but I can't talk about that yet. That's not public. So with some people, again, people you might recognize their names. So that's it. I'm going to take a drink and follow up with that.
Wow, man. Well done. Yeah. So lots of really, really fascinating things coming out. By the way, was that last one part of your gamify method that you were just describing?
Yeah, no. Well, there's not really. It's like a podcast. There's people in it. Stay tuned. Yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing that really modern art has done pretty well. Like, really good examples, like Christopher Nolan movie Memento, where the movie's basically told backwards. And I mean, it's been out for a while. I don't have to spoil it for anybody, but so there's this strategic confusion in the way the story begins, and you have all these questions. When you have questions that you want to know the answers to, you pay attention. So that's it. So I think that, generally in pop music or rock music or progressive rock or alternative, there's not a ton of work out there with real lyrical depth or any kind of like really coherent mythology or symbolism in it. So the fact that we're really making that something that's upfront in our music, so that we're pushing this sort of personified, enchanted world into our stories, gives people more to pay attention to. But by gamifying it and letting them know there's something to look for, I think it is often just enough for people to start to dig in. So we started doing that on a record we did called The Raven Locks, where everybody knew it was a musical, but nobody knew the story, and they were trying to gather the details of the story from the songs. But I don't really like expositional songs in musical that just describe the plot and what's going on. So it wasn't a ton of help, But some people, man, got really close to putting the whole thing together. Jonathan kind of figured out the story. Jonathan Peugeot, back to him. I'm just going to talk about him the whole time. He looked at our album cover, and just looking at the symbolism on the album cover, he kind of figured out the story like a creeper. It was really crazy how much he's like, oh yeah, based upon this, what you're using in this image, here's the story. And I was like, oh man, that is so close.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
There you have it.
So yeah, we do put things like that. So Dead Horse has a ton of things we've never talked about, which is our last concept record. And I probably won't. I have the story of Dead Horse online. I'm so tempted to pull it down. People were asking and asking and asking. They wanted to know more. I didn't want to tell any of it. And Kate kept elbowing me. She's like, you have to give people something. So I gave them kind of an outline overview in 3 parts. It's 3 hours long. So, I mean, they got a lot. But I'm probably going to pull it back down because I hope people in the future come along and, try to figure out what it means, and hopefully members of the community.
Oh, you're right, because they have the opportunity of watching that first.
Yeah.
Or maybe a little bit prematurely in that line of drawing people along.
Right.
Questions and answers.
It's there, and Dead Horse, again, for people who aren't familiar, was it's a story that goes well into the future, and it's this dystopian, and a word that Rod Dreher used when he was describing the record was, it's like discussing a pink police state. And I loved that phrase because it's the idea that you get people to behave by trading off things they really like for surveillance and a loss of rights. It's like, I have a song, But Never a Key, that kind of deals with that. It's like, hey, you're going to choose the cage if people get you scared enough of what's outside of it. And, your warden's going to be fine. They'll keep feeding you in the future. They're going to keep you happy in there, but they won't give you the key back. So you're not getting out. And so that's kind of the story of Dead Horse.
My favorite song from the album. Definitely.
Oh, that one is?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Cool. I don't know why I'm so drawn to like that haunting piano and kind of like the minor tones and
Oh yeah. It's somber. Then it just, well, that song too, like I like songs that do this. Like they just keep going up.
Yes.
And not every song can do that, but that was a good one because it starts out so crescendo. Mellow, and it just things start to get more intense, and it's called prosody. And it's I talked to this about last time, which is the same as word painting, which is the idea that the way the music develops in tandem with the plot of the story and the lyrics, so that as the story starts to break down and things fall apart, the song gets louder and louder and more intense. So that's one of the things.
Sounds kind of like the world that we're living in today.
Yeah, it's weird out there, man. It's weird.
Yeah,
it's weird. There were gas lines in Kentucky today. That's all I know.
Man, were there like Ford Pintos and?
Yeah. It was like we threw it right back it took me back to being a little kid waiting in gas lines behind a Ford Pinto. Perfect.
Man. Yeah. So with the prosody and those type of things, do you cover that in your videos and the content that you make for your Patreon account?
Okay, so yeah, we do have a Patreon, and so this year is really the first year I've done Dirt Poor Robins full time. I've always worked for other people on other projects, and it got to the point where it was sustainable on its own, and we made it. Definitely did that when we started a Patreon channel, and so we finally made merchandise, like all kinds of things I was putting off. I was just making music and spending no money marketing and pushing it out there and letting people find it. That was my plan prior to 2021. So we launched a Patreon, and so the Patreon, yeah, we do some stuff. So people are really interested. We have a lot of people are interested in different types of authorship and writing, or even just literature appreciation. So I do a monthly workshop on the metaphysics of story, and we break down different stories and why they're important. Again, a big part of what I talk about, and it seems like everybody in the community I'm involved in is talking about, is this re-enchantment of the world. The idea that, well, our kind of modern materialistic view of the world is kind of disenchanted it. We just see mechanical causalities when we look out the window. When we see a mountain, we see something that like, oh, look at this thing that was formed over millions of years by the smashing of tectonic plates, and like, we look at like we don't
geological layers.
Thing. Yeah, it's like it's so boring and it's so dull, and people wonder why they have to resort to this like weird therapeutic, like, no, you're good as you are, you're fine, like these therapeutic solutions for this horrible cavity they have in their chest because they're not connected to the world around them or other people, and it's getting worse. And for other reasons, it's getting worse. I mean, we've all been masked and hiding from each other, so it's not getting better. So part of what the hope is when we talk about these stories and we talk about even music is that people look and see a different world outside their window, that they start to reconnect to it. And I mean, I hate to use the word ancient way because we normally assume something primitive about it, but it's actually way more sophisticated than this dull, these dull realities we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And, so there's no life in the world outside, and there's no life in these relationships. And so we talk about the metaphysics story, but I also get into music theory. So I actually played part of our last video in one of the classes that I did with you because
cool.
it saved me a ton of time.
Glad it could help.
We're talking about the different elements of music. Yeah. So I started doing those instead of videos. I do those as like a Q&A. So I'll have something I want to talk to people about. And I don't want to talk about like, here's what an eighth note is. Here's what a tempo is. Here's what a meter is. Like, it's not that kind of music theory. It's more of like, well, so one of the problems with music theory is that this is like a thing that people use to bludgeon like musicians who don't know it. So I had a classical background and training. So this stuff is like, it's second nature to me. I understand it. But I'm past the point of thinking about it very much when I make music, like especially, those type of answers or the names of things. And so people are like, well, the Beatles didn't know theory. It's like, no, the Beatles knew theory. Like, you could speak your language, even if you can't write it, you're illiterate, you could still talk and use all the parts of speech. And so they absolutely understood what they were doing intuitively, and they had their own vocabulary for it. And so the way they call it, you don't know theory, meaning that they don't know how to notate it or what to call it. And that's not the same thing. So we teach music theory, not from the perspective of like, okay, here are all the granular components that make up music. It's talk about it like the concept and why music's meaningful and how it gathers itself in us. So it's like the stuff that no one talks about that everybody needs to know. They just don't know they need to know it because no one talks about it. So we do that with music, and then we do that with stories. So, but we do that as a question and answer time. So people will ask me a lot of more of the granular questions in question and answer, like, well, how do I get a good mic sound on a vocal? Or, what chords are you using in this song? Or, how do I create this mood? And they ask questions like that. So we answer those too.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So I'm glad you brought up the marketing component, because I guess one of the questions leading up to this conversation is in two parts. And maybe we could use your new song, Anthem to the Edge of the World, as like a use case, perhaps.
Sure.
So the first part is, how do you take an idea and turn it into a thing or a song or a movie or a book or story or something, something that ends up on a disc or something that ends up in a book or, something like that. And then the part two would be, how do you take that thing and then tell people about it in like a healthy, meaningful, and also financially sustainable way? So part one is idea to song.
Let me write some notes down, because you just gave me 2 hours worth of discussion points. So let me start with this in a weird spot. It was like, I remember I don't watch Joe Rogan much, but every once in a while I get really attracted to watching episodes with people I disagree with. And I don't disagree with these people entirely. I actually kind of like both of them, but there's two episodes that had something
appreciate
common
about Joe Rogan. I will give you that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I like the podcast. I mean, I've watched a bunch of his episodes. I just don't watch it often. I don't have time. Like, I work on music. My ears are taken most of the time. And then I'm with my
3-hour podcast.
Yeah. Like, well, am I going to 3 hours here? Like, oh, thank God I'm designing an album cover. I can listen to Lord of Spirits on Ancient Faith Radio finally. Like,
yeah, so if I have 3 hours, it would probably be Lord of Spirits.
Right. So, so I did that. But, so anyway, Neil deGrasse Tyson was one of the guests, and Eric Weinstein was one of the other guests I had watched, and they both had something very much in common, because Joe Rogan wanted to talk about, like, especially with Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's like, people want to know why we have gravity. Like, what's besides the fact that it does exist and how it works, they want to know why we live in a world with gravity, or they want to know why we live in a world with this. And Eric Weinstein and Neil deGrasse Tyson both had sort of the same take on it. It was sort of like, well, why ask why? Isn't it more fascinating and interesting to like understand like the physical properties of the universe, and that there's a nebula and here's how nebula form, and they start to get into this kind of scientific jargon as if this is the real
unsatisfying.
Yeah. Okay. So here's my, like, they could not be more detached from humans when they say that, because how many great works of art use that type of vocabulary or discuss the universe or life that in those terms? Like, none. Like, if I write I would have to be like a progressive, strange jazz artist who sold 3 copies a year to start talking about nebula and dark matter in my song, and like with any level of detail, or something on the atomic level, or start to describing quantum physics in a song or mathematical systems. Like nobody would be interested. It would not move a single heart. That someone might, it would just invite people to evaluate it, like, as or to reason it out. Is what he's saying right or wrong? It's not, it's not beautiful. So when you asked that question, I had to go back there, because I think that everything begins with an intuition, and the intuition is shaped by what you believe is really going on in the world and what you believe is really important. So if I went around and gathered intuition like a scientist, or try to fill myself with this modern world of these dull realities, like I wouldn't have anything that anybody wanted to listen to. So I don't start with any kind of random view of the universe at all. I don't start with a nihilistic view of the universe. I start with the idea that no, like everything is here to teach us. Everything's here for a reason, that we were placed here with this perspective inside this head to see the universe a certain way. And there's a right way to take it in and a wrong way to take it in. So and that's why I prefer the ancient view, where people tried to come up with stories to explain why things were where they were. Like even some of the silly ones, like even I respect that a heck of a lot more, because people, it can at least inhabit a story. We can at least imagine ourselves as being in the right mode with that story, right? And also there's a credential for why you believe something's right or wrong or worthwhile. So the problem with like a modern view is there's no credential for why anything's right or wrong, outside of your own personal taste. So it's a very hard way to discuss the universe or what we ought to do next if you don't believe that the universe was made for a reason or for a purpose, because then the word ought goes away. It's like there is no ought, because then there's no ordinance. The things were not ordained to be one way and not another. And therefore now you're just telling me whatever you want, whatever system you want to push on me, and I'm going to tell you whatever system I want to push on you, instead of trying to discover the meaning of everything. So
to this point, you would say like a modern approach to art would be that of, personal expression. And then if people appreciate it, great. If not, whatever. Like it's maybe self-centered at times. But
it's a little bit. It can be, depending on how far you go. So I lived in Providence. It could also
be commercial too, which is the opposite of that in the other extreme.
Right. Yeah, it depends. I mean, I don't want to answer that because I think it'll be a little off track. But
But then the other side of that would be maybe like the modern view is more so of trying to describe reality or the order of creation in a way that makes sense to humans that you can inhabit, like you said.
Yeah, it's a very human perspective. So my intuition now, I'm not involved in what like some authors have called an art ghetto. And the art ghetto is the idea ghetto. Like this happens to people. You get stuck in like a conversation that has nothing to do with the human experience or other people. It's everything is commentary on the thing before it, and becomes sort of like an inside joke. And people, it's like a false type of elitism. It's like, well, I mean, there's a way to look at it like this. Like etiquette is a thing like this, what I'm about to describe. So etiquette is like, sure, there has to be an order and a procession to things in an event. But etiquette is also a way to keep out other people or to make them feel below you, because they can't come and participate because they don't know the etiquette, and they're going to feel foolish. They don't know the clothes. It's a way to sort of like, I mean, I don't really like defining things as oppressive narratives, but you can see a part of etiquette as a way to oppress people you don't want to deal with, people that are beneath you or below you. And so, college education can be that. There can be, I know people that were wonderfully talented people that went to college and spent the rest of their life trying to satisfy and impress the obscure taste of one professor who never made any good music. Right. He just had that influence on them. They were trapped under it, and they're aiming for the absolute wrong thing. It's like,
it's like barricading yourself up as high as you possibly can on the social academic hierarchy or something.
Right. And so I grew up in the Providence, Rhode Island, and they have more artists per capita there than anywhere. And there's RISD, which is the Rhode Island School of Design. And it was a really good firsthand look at why I didn't want to be an abstract artist or be a part of this conversation. When I moved to Louisville, the artists seemed to be way more community focused, not as an artistic community, but as far as like the community around it, and try to create for that audience of just regular people and get an amen back. like so they would get it, instead of like looking around for these small pockets and niches of people. And because you can create that same sort of thing with etiquette, like this artificial aboveness, because like you don't get the conversation, well, you're not, I'm sorry, you're not smart enough, is what people, I mean, people have felt that, right? Like when someone shows you a band and you don't get it, and you're kind of like, you feel like, oh, maybe I am a little dumb. I feel like that all the time. I feel like I just laugh at them.
Don't you remember that, early 70s progressive math rock band that only came out with like 5 songs? And no, I don't.
And then you listen to it and you're like, it's not, well, so I mean, they're like, there's this band called the Silver Apples, and they're like the first glitch pop band, and they're like, they came around in the 60s, and I knew someone who was really into it. And like I picked it up and I listened, and I was like, oh man, like this, like they really were like inventing glitch pop. That's pretty crazy. That's like 3 decades before I even thought it could exist. But the song stunk. Like, so it's like, I mean, they had like I hate to diss the Silver Apples that no one heard of, but I just wasn't like, the compositions weren't there. So it was like, yeah, it's a novel sound, but it's like, it's got to connect back to a human experience. So modern times, what I'm talking about here is an interpretive structure for the universe, like to look at things. So as a Christian, I see there's a verse in the Bible where it says, Christ is the light of the world, and he is the means by which we see things correctly. It's like what I believe. Like, so if I look at it through his sacrifice and his work, like, and like if you want to look at it all the way through, like his journey into hell and defeating of death, and you look at the world through that, it all comes together in a way that's much more coherent and beautiful and meaningful to me than any other view I've been presented with. So it radically changed what I see when I get up and I look out the window in the morning. Like, it's the world is live, and it's not just like, oh, it's clean, it's fresh, it's nature, it feels good. Like, trees mean something different to me than they used to, and the grass means something, and the sky means something different, and the moon and the stars, they all mean something different, and they're a witness to a bigger story, as opposed to, look at all these things that randomly got here. So I think that's, I mean, if someone is not interested in that, then absolutely don't listen to me, because this is the only thing I talk about. So so if you want to know my process, like, you can't sit here and you won't understand it unless you're interested in, like, oh yeah, I would love to expand my view. I would love to see, something more out of the world. I'd like to be able to extract more beauty from life. So that is kind of like where I'm heading with that, is that, I think that what happened in modern times is this Christian story kind of fell into the background. It ruined art in a way, because people lost this interpretive structure and things got more and more abstract. And it even lost it for the Christians, who started to participate in this weird modern materialistic narrative, where the art had less depth and it seemed to be more of a thing to deliver a message. So I think that when I look back, so there's something that artists need to do. Like, so I have a low disgust reflex for things that are new to me. Like, I don't see something new and have a pushback reflex. I'm not bothered enough, even maybe sometimes, by things that should bother me. Like, it's like, oh, that someone took that a little too far. I'm kind of interested to see why. And so that's a bonus and a flaw. But so artists generally are those types, right? And part of being that type is you want to see how much things that haven't been used or integrated can be integrated. So you start looking for new and novel things, or you're trying to see how much more chaos can be incorporated and understood and useful. And that's how any genre grows. That's how music has grown. It's even how Gregorian chant turns into an opera or an orchestra. And then, it keeps evolving.
There's an element of courage in that.
Yeah, absolute courage. The problem is that, like, when you lose the interpretive structure of what the center of reality is, right? Now you're one of those weird artists who's like, I know, we'll design a car with the axle on the outside of the wheel. And it's like, no, we don't. That's sacrosanct. We don't have to move the axle. Yeah. Like, I don't think we're going to beat the rules of the universe on that. So there's this sense where they push beyond a human perspective, and art has really given up its storytelling ability and its ability to communicate beauty. You could see that there's in some of these artists, you can see that there's this vague sense that there's something better out there. They don't know how to grab it, though. They're trying to paint something beautiful, but they don't know how to make something beautiful that's structured. So I think that's when any of the questions you asked about art and the process and whatnot, I think that people have to go back and and figure out what they think the universe is. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm telling you, I from firsthand experience, where I used to get stuck sometimes on ideas or like was wondering what I was going to do next. At this point, with the worldview I have, I don't know how I'm going to do all the ideas I have. Like they just don't stop. So
Right.
I can't slow down. So I'm just still working. But I think that that's an important thing for artists, is that they have to pay close attention to their intuition, and that they have to, and that people won't find something satisfying unless you've taken these patterns and these things we see in the universe and you personify them and you make them personal. You add some spirit to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So that's really helpful. Having that foundation, that framework of understanding the world and intuiting it is really important. I'm also wondering how that looks practically. So I know our last conversation was about 2 hours of rich, beautiful theory and maybe some more abstract ideas. And in this conversation, I'd really like to try to draw a little bit more of the practical stuff that people could maybe take home. And so in this particular case, I'm wondering, what does that look like for, let's say, your latest single, your song?
Yeah.
So was it intuitive? Like, was it something that just came to you? Was it a glimmer of something you heard in something else, and then you combine that with other things? A quote that also comes to mind is C.S. Lewis was responding to a fan who wrote to him and said, I really, really liked the Chronicles of Narnia series. I'd really like you to write an 8th book. Right? He only published 7. She was requesting an 8th. And he said, well, my dear reader, this is how it works. Whenever I get an idea, I write it down. And whenever I don't, I can't.
Right.
So I'm wondering, is your process something similar to that, or how does that look like?
Yeah, I guess I know what he means. I don't try to force things. So, okay, so now that we've got like how I fill my intuition with things, because artists needs to work by intuition. They have to have a filter for how they collect and categorize the world and how they integrate that. So if you don't integrate the world, you're not the right way or through the right window. It's not going to. You're going to have a different intuition. So, yes. So when we have these albums and we have these stories and we have these songs, when someone asks me about a particular song, they're like, "What does this mean?" or "Why'd you write it?" or there's this tendency to take what was done intuitively, like let's say the higher order of how your mind works, and then explain it with reason. So you have to take the process and lower it to people. And so what ends up happening when you watch actors and musicians and people in interviews is that they're Monday morning quarterbacking themselves. They're kind of
Right.
reverse engineering their intuition. And so it's like, sometimes it's just like, oh, it felt right, or it sounded cool, or it seemed to fit. Was the real reason, was the reason they chose that approach, but they'll give you what it appears to them now. So the thing is, like I said, when I was talking about this anthology we put together of what we had done so far, there was definitely a theme to it. But did we intentionally set out to write that theme? Not at all. We're just going where our intuition is. We're looking for things that make us want to weep or punch something, or that bring out some emotion. So generally, what I'm writing about is whatever's troubling me most about the world around me. So there's a sense, an artist, I feel like not every artist has to do this, but as an artist, I like to do this, is like you kind of separate yourself, not from your own experience, but from the rest of the world. And you look at it and you see, and every once in a while you just see herds of people running towards the edge of the cliff. And you're like, oh my gosh, how do you get them to not run towards the edge of the cliff? And so, Dead Horse, for example, is a big version of that. I wrote the record because it was in, I forget, it was 2017 or 2018. The first idea, I really researched what a pandemic was. And I was like, oh my gosh, a pandemic now would absolutely you could restructure society. It could ruin everything. It turn some people
I'd
some
say
people never want to leave their home. Anyway, so you get the picture. So I just happened to start riffing on the idea of a pandemic. And I was so concerned that any little hiccup, because people were becoming so safety oriented. And everybody was becoming a helicopter mom and wanted the helicopter mom for the government that's just watching them and making sure they don't fall down or they don't make mistakes or someone's there to fix things.
Mm-hmm.
Is that I was like, oh my gosh, like this is a problem. So you try to not go insane yourself. So I write songs to kind of find my sanity in, or tell the story, or take the perspective of the person who's lost in it, or take the perspective of someone who can see around it. So uh, just these things will just come out intuitively. All of a sudden, a lyric will hit you, and you just start writing a song, or you have a melody, or I'll sit down, I'll write a melody, and I realize the melody sounds like the thing I'm thinking about to me. So I'll write the song. Or an image will hit me, and then there's a whole story there. Like you see an image and you want to explain that image, and you have a story. C.S. Lewis talks about that, since you brought him up, with the Chronicles of Narnia, that he saw, he saw Tumnus, the character Tumnus, the faun. He saw a faun next to a lamppost in a wooded area carrying like parcels and an umbrella or something like that. And he was like, once I had that image, he's like, he wrote the Chronicles of Narnia to make sense out of that.
Right.
Like,
and then a lion showed up. And then
so one of the things you'll have,
yeah,
exactly. You'll have an intuition about just a small image. So my movie is the same way. The one that's coming out, I had an intuition about an image. Actually, everything I've done is the same intuition. The cover of Dead Horse is the image that came to my mind, and the Raven Locks, our Act 1 digital album cover, is the image that came to mind. So this image comes to mind, and I start to interrogate the character. I'm like, how did you get here, and what are you doing? And so there's always a before and after story to the image. And so that's how my intuition works. So I'll get an impression that I like, and then I'll ask it, really, like I know it's not answering. I know it's all within me somewhere, but I'm asking it a question like, how did you get here, and why are you here? And then I look for the answers. And when the answer that comes to my head sounds right, I keep it, and it seems to fit. And then when you're done, if you really were true to your intuition, and you weren't trying to force something into the story, and you have something that's coherent, like that's my experience. I don't know if other people have that same experience, but if I don't force it, and I let it talk to me, I mean, I sound like such a fruitcake saying that, but I mean, like this, you could do this about anything. You can stop when you don't know what to do. You can sit yourself in a chair in your mind, and you can interview yourself, and you might find a surprising answer. The other thing is, part of my worldview is I don't believe every idea in my head is a good idea, and I don't believe every idea comes from me. I think that's a terrible mistake that people have in the world, is they think that every impression they have it might be a good one, or is their real self, and like, no, there's absolutely some stuff you should not give into.
So how do you test that out?
Well, I mean, that goes back to Christ being the light of the world. When I look at it that way, I have this narrative of what he did, and it's incredibly surprising, incredibly profound, and sacrificial love to the utmost degree, which is easily, like, in a narrative sense, you could argue that's the greatest love. It's beyond unconditional love, because it actually requires something of you to make things right. So when you look at it that way, you can see the difference, and your body's like, you got two different parts. So so here's a good way to talk about it. Think about Captain Hook and the pirates. Okay. And you could think about Moses and the Israelites, or you can think about, there's an authority and then there's a body. So Captain Hook is a good example of, he exemplifies what you would call the sins of the mind, the error of the mind, and like, he's proud, he's narcissistic, he is anxious, he's freaked out, like he's totally afraid of this crocodile. He doesn't see things from the crew's perspective, right? So he exemplifies all the sins of the mind. And then the body, there are these pirates out here. They're in it for the treasure. They're in it for the stuff they want to consume, right? They're there to get stuff that they can eat and spend. And okay, so that's like your body. Your body's like, you could describe it as like, it has all these powers, but it's also appetites, right? So you have all these appetites, and the appetites are always trying to trick your mind, right? They're trying to protest so hard that your mind will rewrite its story to shut the appetites up, right? And you don't shut the appetites up. They keep coming. If you don't learn to put them in the right place, you're going to become an addict in whatever thing it's arguing about, whether it's sex, food, material gains, whatever kind of pleasure it is, whether you want to sit back and relax, you can talk yourself into, you can let that part of your body rewrite your mind. So in Peter Pan, the reason the pirates are a stable entity, because there's Smee. Smee is this guy who's in between, right? So he tries to, he tries to, like, so the whole story, I mean, there's a version of Peter Pan I watched where they didn't have Smee in it, and it was so stupid. It was like, um, it's funny too, because like in the end of the Peter Pan Disney version, Smee's the first one to abandon ship on everyone. But so he has to sit here and help all these neurotic aspects of Captain Hook's mind, and he has to turn him into something stable that will serve the pirates, or they'll have no pirates. They'll never get anything done. They'll be chasing down all of his wacky ideas and his conspiracies and his paranoia or his lust for whatever it is he wants, or his vainglory. And Smee also does the same thing for the pirates. He talks to the pirates and he's like, hey, listen, like, oh, here's why this is good for you, and here's why you ought to do it his way. And so
Smee is like a spirited element.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, no, he's like a mediator.
The mediator, yeah.
So, I mean, when you look at your own mind, I mean, so the problem is like when you get into, okay, so what do I write about? What do I write about? So the world doesn't pay attention. They have no attention span anymore. That's gone. So it's like, well, how do I get people's attention? It's like, well, generally people resort to whatever they have permission to use. So if you get into like Cardi B or who is the artist?
That's right. We got into hooks versus melody last time.
Yeah.
In our last talk.
Yeah. Lil Nas X. And some of these artists that are they're aiming really low at the appetites, right? Like, you see this happening more and more in pop music, it's not so concerning to me that people find that appealing. Like, of course you're going to find it appealing. There's like, if you did heroin, you're probably going to love it. Like you're going to love it for a little while. It's just not going to turn out well in the end. And so you don't,
right.
If you tell yourself the right story, right? So the thing is, it's not surprising to me that people are like really into this. What's sad is that we're seeing it like evaporate very quickly from popular culture. Anybody who has the ability or the willingness to figure out how to discuss real beauty, right? So it's the absence of the tool set and an audience that can even gather it in to experience like what it takes a longer time to build, or some patience or some attention to build like a real beautiful story. And they just want like something right away. Like I had a course teacher in high school who used to try to get our attention as a class, and we would never pay attention. And then he probably shouldn't have been doing this, but if things got really bad where the choir was out of hand, he would yell the word sex, and everybody would shut up and turn. And it's like, now that I have your attention. And that's exactly like, I mean, that's a perfect example of what some art has resorted to. So
wow.
I don't know if that helps. So my intuition, I describe my intuition and some of the problems. So I'm trying to help people pursue beauty with a capital B, like that beautiful thing worth rescuing the princess for, or the princess who is trying to pull her family back together, or rescue something from the like the Princess and the Frog when the ball in the swamp. Like there's this pursuit of what matters most in those stories, and it's telling you how to persevere and go after it. And that's gone, but I try to put that in our music. Like whether I do it by intuition, I think it's just my goal in general in life for anyone, and it's my hope for people, so it comes out in my intuition.
That's really good. So in the case of your single Anthem to the Edge of the World, so
yes.
Take us from like I got like a few little glimmers and ideas and my intuition, and then how did you begin like fleshing that out into a song?
Well, so I knew what I wanted to write about. So because I have a single that leads off this compilation, I was like, this single kind of needs to be. So I had a song. It was actually about a much smaller idea, and I love the song, and I want to put it on something else one day. But I knew it wasn't right for that spot. It didn't, like, part of art is fitting things together well. It didn't feel like it fit, or if I was only going to have one new song on the record, it wasn't the right one. So I ended up like, well, look at these songs and what are we talking about, and how is this relevant right now? And I was like, okay, I'll write this song called Anthem to the Edge of the World. And it's about, not to give too much of it away, not that it'll be a spoiler for enjoying the song, but what I mean by it is that they're just, people are like, they're just drifting off, they're drifting away, and they don't understand their own nature. They don't understand what they're trading off. They don't understand the bargain they're giving up when they're giving over to this new world that we're heading into, like this world where we're so easily satiated, and we never have to wait to, we never even have to endure boredom, really. You can just take your phone anywhere with you, and it's like you've always got something to entertain you. We don't understand what we're trading away. It's hard to see what we're giving up because we're all like little addicts, myself included, where it's like, you want that thing. It's so easy.
Mm-hmm.
So
you know what? That reminds me of the proverb that says that a fool is so lazy that he doesn't even have like the energy to bring his hand with the food to his mouth.
yeah, right.
Anyway, go ahead.
Funny. That's a real exaggeration of the pattern. I like that. So that's a problem. And so I wanted to write a song about how it's happening to people. So I wanted to discuss. So I call this movement, whether it's a technological movement, a demonic movement, if you want to use that terminology, or just the technology companies trying to push this on it, but people are you're trading things away every day. You don't realize it. You're just giving up more so you can have your fix. You can shorten your attention span all the more and never pay attention and live your whole life and never knew that you never pursued anything meaningful or valuable. And so that's the song kind of deals with that. It's a wake-up call, and it sort of ends with something better to look at, is the idea. So Anthem to the edge of the world is like the symbolism of the edge of something and the end of something is the same. Like the edge of the table is the end of the table. And there appears to be something, I have a cyclical view of time. And that means that like I see our day is like a microcosm for an entire life where we wake up, we get up, we gain our energy, we prepare for work, we go and work, we retire, we relax, we end up doing like, we don't have to work because the work's been done, and then we go to sleep, we die.
Yeah, my conversation with Alistair Roberts, you mentioned that sleep is kind of like a mini death.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what you see. You die every night. You're well prepared for this moment. You have to give up, and you get incoherent, and you're like an old person, and you die, and then you have to find your feet again in the morning. So you keep rehearsing the whole bigger pattern. So there's all kinds of patterns like this. There's years, there's seasons, there are cycles of the moon. There's even the Bible has this pattern. You can break the Bible very easily into like, there's this infancy. It's like, oh, look, you're not eating solid food. People are like giants to you. It's like you can get like really like out there in the way you compare it, but you can see it. Then you get to the point where you can actually be given some rules. Like you can reason enough where we can give you a couple of easy rules to follow. And then the law comes along as like a guide and a shepherd, like Paul calls it. And you can see the Bible is this
king comes as well.
Age. So the thing is that like most people who are religious, especially Christians, are under the sense that this is all going to be that this age is going to come to an end eventually, right? And I think these things are easier to discern than people think, not meaning like the exact moment or the exact details, but let's just take the cycle of a day, and we're talking about okay, so let me just ask you these questions. It's like, what time of day is someone more likely to watch television?
Probably the evening.
Yeah. What time of day is someone more likely to drink?
The evening.
Right. What time of day is someone more likely to participate in like sexual activity?
Nighttime.
Right. Okay. So, so all of these things are like, okay, so what is becoming more and more accessible and more abundant? It's like in our world. So you could see it almost as if the world, our technology we're retiring. Like our technology is really close to retiring drivers, people who work cash registers. And we're like right on the cusp of that. It's like evening when I look out at the world. And that's why I feel like there's some synergy with this apocalyptic sort of view that our band takes, that the world, if we're paying attention, you can see that like all of the things that when you retired or at the end of the day you do, our whole world is starting to do those things. People are needing to work less. People are less willing to work. Our technology means that like if you just say you want to be a stay-at-home mom, it's like, congratulations, you have all these great appliances. You don't have to spend 80 hours a week trying to get the laundry done and food on tables anymore. You can actually like do some other things. So if you're going to read the signs of the times, you have to look at it outside and you have to be like, it's at least evening or later. These things are starting to abound, right? And so I think that's worth mentioning in the context of this, is that there is a way to look at things and read into the future a little bit with that.
Now, okay, so one of my favorite parts of the song that I think you're touching upon is the bridge, or maybe you could call it like the outro.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Because I repeat an anthem instrumentally through almost the whole song, and then it's sung at the end, but without lyrics. So the bridge really is the end.
Yeah.
of those books.
Yeah. So you have a lot of lyrics. In fact, I printed out a page and a half worth of lyrics. And, but then like the last third of the song is instrumental, you know, a series of
Mhm.
solos and things. So, like, why did you decide to lay out the song in the way that you did?
Um, yeah, so I guess there's the undefined element at the end. So um it's like a move in it's like the first half of the song you could say is the call, and the second half of it is the going out, right? Going
Mm-hmm.
out to the edge.
Mm-hmm.
So Anthem to the Edge of the World isn't just the idea that it's the end of the world in a way. It's the idea that like, well, somebody has to give hope to the people in this time, right? Somebody has to warn them of what they're giving up. I mean, not even like, and not in a moralistic finger wagging kind of way. Like, it's like, oh, you're all so naughty out there. It's like, no, man, there are so many things that can distract you from ever seeing what really matters. It's so dangerous. You can just live a whole life and never know it. Like you could be here, never have kids, have a dog, watch Netflix and go to bed every night, smoke pot, whatever. And suddenly you're 90 and you're in a nursing home and you like that was it. That was all you did. And the world might not be any better because you're in it, and you might be worse off, right? than you were.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody has got to like somebody's got to give some kind of hope or some kind of at least like make a case for something different, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
we're just a bunch of puppets and sheeple. So I guess the second half of the song just kind of represents that being carried into the future.
Kind of reminds me of Dusk, you know,
Dusk?
like Dusk, you know, like some the sun's neither up or down is the kind of
Oh
like
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
in
right, yeah,
between. You know,
yeah,
it's like that,
exactly.
like
Yes,
a threshold where it's is it inside, is it outside? It's
right. Or if you take a picture of a sunrise or a sunset, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference later. Um,
precisely. Yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah,
exactly.
right.
Yeah. So it's kind of like that Christian idea of if you, at least from our human perspective, if you take the pattern of a day and you stretch it out all the way, you end up with an age. And we're not quite sure what the age beyond this one is going to look like.
Right.
But
Well,
we
you
have
see
some
these
ideas
like
and some hints.
yeah. Well, in the Bible, you see these cycles going along, right? So these things like these patterns keep reoccurring and reoccurring. And so Alistair Roberts had on the channel, I think, is really brilliant at articulating typology in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a guy I'd like to have a really long conversation with someday about it. But so the idea is every time it comes around, it should mature, right? So you could see how, like, let's take a pattern like Jesus harrowing hell, which is the idea that he becomes this like what they call the scapegoat in Israel, where um, he returns the work of the devil back to him and undoes it, right? So in the harrowing of hell, it's undoing the works of the devil. Um, but to do that, he has to die and go into hell, right? To do it. And so you can look at the story of Samson. Now, Samson is like he's like kind of an anti-hero, but it's the same sort of pattern that it's like an earlier appearance of that same story. And it's also an appearance of a story we see in Jonah. But in Samson, it's like, oh yeah, he has to give up his power, his strength, and he goes and he ends up right in the middle of this other empire, and God restores his strength and he destroys the columns, and from the inside, the very center of this wicked kingdom, he wins.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see these types of I picked that one because it's one people don't talk about, but I mean there's some really obvious ones too. I mean you see it you see this firstborn secondborn pattern as it goes through, and so the idea is that as these patterns spin, they mature. So in the Christian story, there's this story of here our time living under the knowledge of good and evil, but you can see the Bible starts to point to, without spoiling what's implied this next, is that this is a shadow version of a better version next. And C.S. Lewis talks about that, the book's old enough, I think I can spoil the ending of the Chronicles of Narnia, but in the last battle, it's that they go into this place called Aslan's Howe, which is like heaven. And it's like the world they just left. It has all the same familiar places, except they're like the real versions of those places. And before was just like the crappy movie set version. And no matter how far they go into this new world, they keep finding better and better and better and more interesting and more satisfying versions of the world. And the story ends with this idea that, you know, but what I've told you about was only the cover of the book, and that every chapter is the chapters never end, and each one is better than the one before it. And so that's it. I mean, like, so we're getting an impression of what things will be like, but we don't know how to experience what it's going to be like to live under the tree of life, as opposed to the within the knowledge of good and evil. So there, in the Christian story, there's definitely that sense of what this, when this cycle begins again. So like when the sun rises in the east again in this long age, who that sun rises with and what's coming is pretty spectacular. You know,
yeah. So I touched on that in the symbolism of the burning bush, where it's like,
that was a great comes.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. And so the sun comes, and it's like it comes with intensity, and to some that already have that, say like the sun or the fire of the sun within them, it's a glorification. But then others that rejected it becomes a river of fire. But it's right. It's just an intensity. We're like, you know, like the book cover is a helpful way of saying that, because it's like we understand the shapes or maybe some of the primary themes or hints of things, but then the details of which we just haven't opened that book yet.
Yeah. Well, so here's another way to describe it. So if you want to look at the cyclical nature of life, you could see we're in another type of womb right now. And so there's like, you know, when you're a baby inside of your mother, it's like, that's reality. You don't know what's on the other side. There are parts of you that don't even make sense yet. You're not sure necessarily why you have legs or arms. Like, I don't know what the baby's even reasoning is like, but, you know, and then the closer it gets to the end, the more, the less comfortable it is to live in that world, right? The child. So you have all these parts that are really meant for even lungs, like they're meant for the outside. You already start using them, but you're not using them the way you're going to use them. And, you know, in that world too, like I used to get up to you ever do this? Like get up to your wife's stomach and like talk to the baby or like sing a song. Yeah. And then she'll rub it. And so there are things that can't be seen.
Yeah. What does that feel like on the baby side? Man.
Right. And so I've had experiences like this in this lifetime where it's like a hand has come across, or there's right. something like a voice, not like a distinct actual audible voice, but something on the other side, or or outside of the womb that's like waiting. And that I believe there's parts of us, and we have desires for things that there's no reason we should have desire for them. Like we all long for this paradise. We want pain to stop. We want to stop being sad, and we want it to be peaceful and joyful all the time. And like, why should we ever want those things? What person has ever experienced that? Like none of us. And so there are parts of us, and there may be more narrative or spiritual that don't make sense to us yet, that will, once we're on the other side of that door. So that's the other way I postulate that idea, is like, I think that we've already experienced enough to get an idea of what's coming, what comes after. So like, I mean, we can get real doomsday about like, what kind of world are my kids going to grow up to? It's like, well, I mean, we'll prepare them for one, but the next one is going to be a lot better. That's for sure. You know, so
well, I think your song does. Now that we're talking about it, it gets me more excited to go listen to the song again, because of that outro being like that dusk and dawn kind of in between. We're not quite sure, transitional period.
Yeah.
And then also the outro, or the bridge. So okay if I just read a line or two?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so let's see. Tomorrow echoes. Was that like a little call out or shout out to Echoes of Exodus?
I know. No, I use echo is a word I use a lot in the vocabulary. There's very few ways to describe an audio reflection besides the word echo. It's like one of those sad words that I use a lot, because it has meaning. The fact that, you know, something returns back to you. But anyway,
that you can explain in one syllable.
Yeah, it's like echo. So it's done. So you can say it reverberates, and like there's other ways to talk about this spatial, but there's easier ways to say that visually when we're talking about reflections, or, you know, doppelgangers, or all kinds of ways to talk about it, or mirrors. But audio, there's really one. Go ahead.
So you have our call to hope and hope's reply.
Yes.
It's kind of cool twist. And then the next line is looking east beyond the briars, stand with those who favor fire. So there's that fire element. You touch on that till morning breaks and death retires.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know about the listeners on the other side, but like reading those lines feels like it just sums up about the last 20 minutes of what we've been talking about so succinctly. And
Yeah.
Jonathan Peugeot in our talk, he talked for maybe 5 or 10 minutes about directionality of how it matters if you're facing west or if you're facing east.
Yeah.
And that facing east is a posture of anticipation of the age to come.
Yeah, that's where the sun rises, right?
Right.
For everyone. I mean, east and west are different directions, and north and south, because north and south you can get to the edge of, east and west you cannot. And so that is also there's a difference in those directionalities too. But yeah, looking east to the new day, right? So you could think of the whole world we live in. This whole experience as being a human the way we are, as being a day. Like it'll come to an end and it'll be something else. So that's something I'm alluding to. I mean, I think that so like get back to the echo. I don't like to explain lines too much. But why is an echo Hope's reply? Because let's just say the existence prior, that valley was filled with tears, and the fact that the tears are gone is what we hope for, like that every tear will be dried, right? So that's part of this secret longing that's in humans that they don't realize it. I mean, that's why you don't like it and when someone hurts you, right? Or you get hurt. It's
right.
It's pretty obvious, but we don't like to think about it. That I don't know. Sometimes I think people just avoid thinking about what that means, or the fact that you want that to go away, what that means for the future, and why that desire might be in you in the first place. I'm sure certain people might come up with an evolutionary reason for it.
Right.
I'm not buying it.
Why ask questions of why?
Yeah.
Oh man. So okay, so we're to the point where we're arriving. Oh, so to take an idea or an intuition and make it a thing, or in this case, a song. So at this point, did you have lyrics and then music, or music then lyrics, or kind of weaving the two?
Yeah, so I wrote the melody really fast. I mean, sometimes the melody, so I have a hierarchy of when I consider something worthwhile. And we are very lyric driven band. I've always been lyric driven as pretty much almost everything I've ever worked on. Like that was one of the most important elements to me. The reality is, for an audience, the melody is the most important element. There are thousands of great melodies with terrible lyrics that people absolutely love the songs. I mean, have you ever heard that version of Jack and Diane where they turn all the lyrics into "Sucking on a Chili Dog"?
No,
it's like this because that song has got this incredible chorus. This is an existential question, or like real depressing chorus is anthemic, and it says, "Oh yeah, life goes on long after the thrill of living is gone." And it's like, why are we singing this like as an anthem? It's so dark. But then there's like this kind of like pedestrian kind of verses and kind of folksy verses, and one of the lines is like, "Sucking on a chili dog outside the trees." And so someone did a version where it was just sucking on a chili dog. And so the lyrics in that song aren't always great. The chorus is great. But that's not a best example. There are plenty of songs that people sing and the lyrics are just not, they're not good poetry. There are no songs that people sing that have great poetry and a terrible melody. So I always, my first thing is like, if I get the melody right, if I get the lyrics right, it doesn't mean someone's going to love the song, but if I get the melody right, people will probably love the song. So I generally put more emphasis on melody first. So, because I've done this too, where I've written a song and I didn't love the melody over time, it kind of grated on me, and I really like the lyrics. And so I wrote a new melody to lyrics. So, yeah, so melody first, lyrics second.
Okay. And then, so with the melody, do you kind of just add layers of instruments as you go along, or do you start like on a piano and melody kind of comes?
This is not well, my answer to these questions won't be helpful to people. It's been probably about 15-20 years where I don't actually need to pick up an instrument to write the arrangements anymore. So wow. Yeah, most people don't do that. So that arrangement happened in my head before I recorded it, so it went very fast. And if for people, if you've already played the track in this video, they would have heard that there's this arpeggiating line that kind of goes almost the whole song. And there's not a lot of chords in the song. There's almost no, like, in the arrangement. A lot of people make that mistake in arranging. They're like, something's got to be playing the chords, and you don't. It doesn't. If you structure the song or arrangement properly, or the melody properly, something does not need to be playing the chords. They can be implied. So, and even that, the first chorus of that song is just trombones and a tuba playing power chords and drums. So it's like there's not a lot of harmonic information in the song because the melody implies it. So yeah, it's not really helpful for me to talk about that with people. I mean, if I was going to give them a tip about arranging, is that a lot of what we do is we just copy things we've heard and patterns we've heard, and actually to go back and study, even if you won't use it, classical music, because it has a much wider repertoire of how you can support a melodic structure. And so at least learning or familiarizing your ear with some of that would be helpful. And also try different things out, and whichever one makes the melody catchier is probably the right idea. So
yeah, my mentor always said, just make it sound good. Come on.
Well, that's what's stupid about it. It's kind of like, well, just make it sound good. And someone's like, oh, how'd you do that arrangement? And it was like, I thought of it. It's like, that's it. Like, so it's about everything else will be like, if you want to know why, if you thought it was good or you hated it, I can tell you why I think you hated it or why you thought it was good. So, but outside of that, no, it's an intuitive process mainly.
Okay. So you get to the point where it's recorded, and did you have it mastered? Remember you talked about that before.
Yeah. I always get mastered. I always get my stuff mastered with Shelly at Black Lab Mastering. We've worked together for a long time. So
it becomes an MP3 wave audio,
Yeah. And then how do you get it out there?
Yeah. So part two.
It's a lot easier for us. So, well, I mean, I can answer for us.
Let me just ask.
Okay, go ahead.
Because telling from your beautiful beard, you've had a few decades at this where you could probably remember back in the day when the music industry was well established and a well-oiled machine. And now you've seen probably what could be called as deconstruction and whatever place we're at with modernity as it applies to music and getting it out there and, making enough financial income to where you could sustain yourself as an artist. But then also I want to know, just like some maybe background stuff to give people an idea. Have you been like a hobby musician, part-timer? You'd mentioned being a full-timer this year. Like, what has been your...
Yeah. So what happened?
What does that look like?
I can talk about this. So I started recording studios when I was 13. And the first time I was ever hired for someone else's project, I was 14. And they were adults. So I've been living in that space for a long time. Now, as technology became more affordable, if you wanted to make a record, there was more at your disposal. So you didn't necessarily have to go to a professional studio. So I remember I was 15, we made a record with the band I was in, and recording before us was New Kids on the Block, and recording after us was Aerosmith. To give you an idea of how old I am. So, and it was,
you know what? I shouldn't assume, because my dad ended up getting gray hairs when he was 24.
Yeah, no, I went gray really early. My beard just finally caught up. So, the wrinkles haven't caught up too much yet. So, but
anyway, so Aerosmith. Yeah.
I don't care how old I am. Like, I mean, I thought people would push me out of music by now, and nobody cares. The Rolling Stones and Aerosmith and Metallica are still going. So it's like, there's not many new bands that are doing, really creating new sounds and new work. So the old ones are sticking around forever. So no one seems to care. I remember when I first got into music, it was like you were kind of done in your 30s, and it's like everybody I know is old, who's even in the industry.
Gosh, what are you, like a baseball pitcher or something? That's crazy.
Yeah. No, right. So
I went to listen to BB King when he was like 90.
Yeah, right. I know. So that's funny. Yeah, but so everything's changed. So like all this technology gets cheaper. So when I started getting into making my own records, I'm like, I want to produce. So I produce, and you'd find someone to help you arrange, and you hire an engineer, and you'd hire a studio. Well, slowly over time, it was like budgets got lower. It's like streaming's coming in. It's like, well, we're not going to hire an arranger. We're not going to hire an engineer. You need to do both those things. Or, and then even that, it's like, oh, you better build your own studio, because now you got to compete with other people that have their own studio. And it's like, So you end up having to do like 7 degrees worth college degrees worth of work, as a producer, engineer, arranger, composer, artist. So
sound treating a room,
Yeah, so I got really good at that stuff, like especially sound treating. This room sounds great. So
hey man, if you can flip a trailer into a high quality studio, man, you got some skill, I'd say.
It's fun. It was a fun
Awesome.
challenge. But yeah, so anyway, so when Dirt Poor Robins, let's just talk about Dirt Poor Robins, because that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Our Dirt Poor Robins. There we go. I said it clearly. So Kate and I were working at a church, and I had been working at a marketing company with that. And I was doing marketing for a church mostly, and some music, and running a couple of groups for them. And we made a record because people seem to like our music. So I made a record with like a microphone into a computer. And I mean, I can't even listen to it now, but we put it on CDs, and it's like, oh, wow, 2 months and we've sold 2,000 copies of this. Because I remember I printed up 2,000 copies right away, and the guy at the CD duplication place was like, listen, dude, like, you want all these sitting in your garage? And I was like, no, dude, we're gonna print more. I'll be back. He's like, you're crazy. And so like he also ran a record label, so I came back in a month and a half to order another 5,000, and he was trying to sign us immediately, right? So what happened is we got a lot of offers right away, because you just don't, like, sitting in New England just making a CD on your computer, that just doesn't happen, right? So like we had, and people, so basically if you look at what CDs cost, they were like $12 a pop or $15 a pop or whatever, and it's like, okay, I sold 2,000 of these in a month and a half, 2 months. It's like, I don't need a normal job if I can keep doing this.
Yeah, right.
And but everything changed. So what it was is that was a move into the middle class of music. So there really is no middle class anymore for people.
Yeah, the middle class.
Middle class. So it's you're a hobbyist, you've got a trust fund, or you're huge. And the huge is like 0.01%, right? It's like you're talking about a ridiculous number. So like, and relying on a record label to break you or make you an artist is a terrible idea. The best labels, last time I checked, had like a 1 out of 14 ratio of bands they signed and bands that were profitable. So their batting average is horrible. And generally it ends more careers than it launches. So by far. So we spent a little time on a smaller indie label, and I loved the experience of being on that label, but we didn't want to stay. We didn't want to stay on that label at all. It was not the right growth curve for us, because we knew we wanted to do something different, and we knew it was going to take a long time to get there, but we were hopefully going to be good on our way there where we had an audience. So, so what really changed after that is that we had a larger and larger audience and made less and less money. So with the label, we sold a ton of records at $0, because I went from, making plenty of money for the two of us and our baby to getting a record deal and making no money. Right. So I started producing for other people at that time. And we just kept making music. So we're like, so with Dirt Poor Robins, I really kind of discovered this symbolic worldview in like around 2005, 2006. And I started noticing that
the year before the iPhone.
Yeah. So, right. Anyway. I had this idea, and I didn't know it was a good worldview, right? I just noticed that if I personified the patterns in the world around me, or, put spirits in things and discussed in that level, on this metaphorical level, that actually would work on multiple levels, like in a macrocosm or a microcosm. I noticed that I liked the songs better, and that they were actually moved me. Like I'd be writing, and it was just like I get so excited about what I was doing, and then suddenly I became a lyricist out of nowhere. I was a terrible lyricist. My wife was really the only good lyricist of the two of us, and she kind of taught me our way up. But we kind of discovered this thing, and we just kept recording music. And so
let me ask you this.
Have a marketing plan.
Were you at the point where, from the onset, you're like, this is what we're going to do. We're 100% committed. We're just going to keep writing. We're going to keep producing things. We're just going to, like, did you make that commitment on the onset, or you just kind of follow it one thing at a time? Just
kind of fumbling along, doing whatever
like so it was excited, so you just kept doing what you were excited about.
Yeah. So opportunities come up, and they're generally like, good opportunity is too hard for you or over your current skill set, and I would always say yes to those. So I would have to adapt and just embarrass yourself sometimes. Like there were situations I was in studios with people that were just like so used to that experience, and I was not, and just trying to figure out how to swim and pretend like you're not incompetent in some degree. So like that was a lot of just taking on work that I wasn't ready for because I wasn't afraid to. I figured I would figure it out. And so I was doing that, recording with other bands. I toured with other bands. I was in multiple bands. Another band called No More Kings that had a record deal at the time. And then we just kept recording with Dirt Poor Robins, and we had no marketing budget. We had no budget for anything. I was just using my studio, and I would record stuff in between other projects, and we'd release it. And every record, wouldn't you know, it just got bigger, even though we weren't doing anything. We're terrible marketers. Like I knew how to market. I did that but it sucks the life out of me as an artist. So we relied on a very slow strategy of, if we keep never putting out something if we don't ever put out something we don't love, or like, I can't find the sentence I'm looking for. Otherwise, if I didn't love it, we didn't put it out. If I wasn't through the moon about it, it didn't get on a record. That was our strategy. And so I've already explained our worldview and our intuition and how that was shaping where our music was heading. And we wanted something that wasn't so superficial and so just repetitive like everything else. We didn't want to do that. And it's because everybody complains about that too. They're like, oh, music is so bad now. It's like, okay, well, listen to something better and you probably won't understand it. So, but anyway, we kept just trugging along and kept releasing records. And like Pandora was super helpful, and Spotify's recommendation engine. Like people should not rely on the things we relied on. And so it was like the audience, so for the last 4 years, our audience has doubled like every year. And
so how many views would you say that you get a year or on a given month?
It's hard because I have to total it up over the platform. So I think Spotify just moved into last year our biggest format. So Spotify added quite a few million streams. But I think I'm at like 500,000 streams a month on Spotify now, somewhere close to that. I can double check. We have 92 on that format. We have 92,000 unique monthly listeners. And so that'll probably be close to like 500,000 by the end of the year, at least, as far as total audience. So
now that's so interesting. Just think of like that number, like almost 10,000, right? Unique or new listeners, people engaging with the art that you're publishing, right? And then
across
picture
all
that, like how big of a
100,000.
structure would that have to be to fit all of those people in there? It's like some of these numbers get so lost in how the bigness of them or how abstract they are. Like I was looking at one video.
Spotify does that. Have you seen
300
that?
million views for a YouTube song, like a silly YouTube song that was, I think Alicia Keys or something. Like it was just like ridiculous. It's like 300. Sometimes we get lost in that. So I just want to say, like, that's a pretty big influence.
Multiple billion.
Yeah.
So if it was 1995, we'd have a huge house with a gold-plated pool, with the type of numbers where
back with like CD sales, right?
Yeah, because if these were CD sales, obviously. So, but I mean, a lot of people, you can argue, wouldn't engage if it wasn't free on their platform. So, so I think that's funny. Spotify does a cute thing at the end of the year. They'll show you like, hey, your listeners is bigger than the population of this city. And it's like, wow, that's fun. Thanks for giving me a visual for it. It really brings it home. But it's not huge, but I mean, we found a way to be like middle class to upper middle class. Because once you get to the numbers we are at, you actually start to get paid by streaming services, which is really nice.
Is it pretty sigsignificant?
Or is it
menial?
No, it's good. I mean, I have 4 kids and we can live on it. So
that's good.
And so, and we're making a movie right now. We have other help. So we launched a Patreon this year, and that really kind of pushed us over the top where we could do it full time. Yeah.
Cause my big question too, is like for people that are listening, that are aspiring artists or musicians, like what does it look like to be a middle-class artist?
They're not there though. It's weird.
Or is it that rare where you're like, great, like I'm talking to 5 people,
So, I mean, we'll name the band. I know a guy in a big rock band. There's not many big rock bands left, and he lives nearby. And COVID hit, and they make all their money touring and merchandise sales touring. So he's like living in his dad's basement, and he's like kind of famous. And dude, so I mean, Kate and I were set up for it. My wife's Kate. We were set up for this because we don't tour. We have kids, and we prioritize our kids over, touring. And so that's been a hindrance to us on our growth, because that's also a marketing strategy. It's like a way to get in front of new people all the time, is getting on the road and kicking butt. So we don't do that. So we were kind of set up for the pandemic pretty well. But yeah, so I think that I don't know how to tell people to get to that point though. Like when they ask me, it's like, okay, well, do your best work for a long time, and then maybe you'll have something sustainable. Because what helps us now is we have a large discography. We have, like 5 hours worth of music out there. So when someone finds a song they like, there's plenty to dig into, and it's hard for new artists to compete with that too. It's like you got your one record and people are like, they like you for like 2 weeks, and you're their flavor of the month, and then they forget about you and they haven't followed you before your next record comes out. So, yeah. And then again, the model right now is you got to get out on the road and hustle to make money. So I think that's tough for people trying to make a band. I think you do it because you can't help but do it. Right. So if you have to do it as a hobby, that's fine. If you can't stop yourself from doing it, then you do it. The dream of pursuing fame is just the worst idea right now. Like, you don't want to be famous. That's a terrible mess out there. I think that you'll lose your first love. People like fall in love with music. Music does something to them. They pick up an instrument and then they go out and they're like, I'm going to do it. And as soon as someone realizes they have any ability, they're like, hey, you could do this as a career. And then your mind shifts and you're trying to figure out how to fulfill what somebody in the industry is looking for instead of an audience. So make music, release it, focus on an audience. So the problem for artists too is that you just have to understand it's like not fun. Like, it's awesomely rewarding when you finish, and it's delightful to create ideas, but you got to get up every day and force yourself to do it. Like, you got to pour your coffee. So I have like a morning ritual. I pour coffee. I make really strong coffee if I have it. I have a cold brew already made.
Oh, cold brew. Nice.
I pour that into a coffee maker as the water and then brew coffee. And I don't need it. I just like it the way it tastes.
Oh,
and
man.
I'll like kind of in a Nordic Viking fashion, I'll pop open a can of like smoked salmon or fish, and I'll get to work right away. Like, I'll get up before my family and I'll start working some mornings. And you have to figure out what gets you going and what makes you want to work for a whole day, because it's so tedious. Like, and I'm making a movie. It's so tedious. Like, you have to be insane to actually think about doing this as a career, unless you can't help it. And then by all means do it. If you could see yourself doing anything else and enjoying it, yeah, do that. But the world needs good art. The world needs beauty. It needs, at least we're trying to make good art and try to make it beautiful. I doubt most people would see it that way. I think most people wouldn't like what we do, but there's that pocket that seems to really like it, and it's growing. So
yeah,
that's the thing I think worth mentioning to people is like, no, like, you do it because you got to do it. And also, like, there's this thing that happens in life where it's like, okay, so I go out and play a sport that I haven't played before, and you're a kid and you go to play and you're like, basketball looks fun on TV, I'll try it. And you're not tall. I mean, no, that wasn't my problem, but so someone gets out there and they're like, oh, I want to play center. And it's like, well, you're not tall and you're not fast and you don't have good eye-hand coordination. It's like, yeah, I get it. It looks fun. But there could be a chance that like pretty early on, you figure out that you're not going to be able to compete with people who like there are people out there that are so talented. People don't understand because like, it's okay. So this is worthwhile talking about. Like, I don't like to tell people to give up. Don't give up. If you really love it, don't give up. But if people don't think you're good, give up. Like, if no one thinks you're good, give up. Like that. Like, why would you do that? It's like, because a lot of people will work on it and kind of dream about it and never put themselves in front of an audience. Right. And because you've got to put yourself in front of an audience to get that amen back that you're good, or it's at least promising. Right. And so it might take you a while to figure out how to make it good, but there are some people, because it looks like a sexy industry. It's like a lot of people go to churches and want to be pastors who have no business being pastors, don't have that exhortation skill and that ability to, shepherd. But they just, it's the most important thing around, or it has a lot of sex appeal. I hate to say pastor has sex appeal. That's the wrong analogy. So,
they're starting to crisscross here.
But if you're not like, if people can't see it after a while, like you gotta try something different, because it's a miserable thing to do if you're not really cut out for it.
Gosh,
So
I agree, man. So I did kind of like a mini documentary video essay earlier in the year on the naming of the Super Bowl trophy and kind of like the philosophy and mythology of
I didn't
Vince
see this.
Lombardi.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was my first time doing like, B-roll and some clip footage from, old 1960s Super Bowls and, Vince Lombardi,
Mhm.
shouting at his players and stuff. Uh, it took like, I don't know how many dozens more hours than I thought it would. And I was like, this is what it takes to make a YouTube video that people watch.
Isn't it crazy?
And it's
I know
like,
you're trying to do it legit. It's so crazy.
yeah.
Yeah.
And, it's like, I don't love this. I don't love this part of it. There's other parts of what I do on this channel that I genuinely love. And it helps me embrace the struggle. But then there's other parts of it where I'm like partnering with Pano to do the Mandalorian video
Yeah.
essay. That was fun because I did what I like to do best and he liked to do what he did best. And,
Right.
that collaboration, you fill those gaps. So if I could summarize what you just said, you said it's important to have a purpose. You said the world needs beauty would be yours
Yeah.
and you got to give it to them. Have a ritual because you got to embrace the struggle. And there's
Yeah. You got to
then,
figure it's going to be different for everybody. They got to figure out how they can trick themselves into working all the time.
yeah. And then you got to love to do it and you got to engage with reality, AKA an audience, and get an amen back.
Yeah, the audience is key because it's not industry people. Because there's like great stories in Hollywood of like a Harrison Ford guy telling a man go back to carpeting or whatever, but it's people in the industry telling them that. It's the audience that counts. So if you can get outside of your city and your group of friends and an audience eyes light up or people start to get excited about what you're doing, you got something. If they don't, you can't get outside of your friends and family circle. That's it. I mean, you keep trying by all means if you want to, but that's the test. That's not what someone in the industry tells you. It's what it's what an audience tells you.
Yeah, I think this marketing half of the process has been pretty insightful because some of it I've never heard of before. What you're sharing, you just have a really cool way of going about it.
Well, but think about it this way too. So we don't have a label, right? So I don't have someone who speaks for us. So anything I put out there advertising wise is me telling you. So what am I going to tell you? Hey, I made something I think is awesome. Spend your money on it. Like,
right.
This is great. Like I made it because I wanted to hear it. That's true. So it's like a careful process because I don't want to like brag or, come across like pushy, but you have to. I mean, so the thing is if there are people that like it, the people that really love it, it becomes the soundtrack of their life. Those people are glad you put it in front of them. So it's like there's one of these hard things to weigh. You have to find a way to get it in front of people that is genuine and you're not being fake about it, but you also don't want to deny people the opportunity who it enriches their life, the chance to have access to it. So that's what I always remind myself of because I just don't want to market. I don't want to market. I don't want to give my money to any of these platforms. But at the end of the day, it's like, well, how are you going to find new people? You have to have an alternative plan. If that's not the way you're going to do it. So you have to take that same creativity you put into making the music and you have to put it back into the marketing somehow and find a way to do it that's honest and you're comfortable with and where you afford people the opportunity of finding something they might love.
Did you ever use CD Baby?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Derek Sivers is the creator of CD Baby.
Oh, is
the quote and the link that I sent you.
They send me all kinds of emails I never read.
Yeah. So he has a quote from his book, Your Music and People, which is kind of a cool thing where he uses a musician as like a use case for maybe his philosophy with art creation, but then also marketing. And he says, art doesn't end at the edge of the canvas. It's kind of cool how he uses that word edge like you do. So art doesn't end at the edge of the canvas. And then he says that marketing is the continuation and also the final extension of your art. And a really cool way he says like how you communicate it is important. So like if you're, big industry, big label that communicates something, if you have no label and you're out there and you're, trying to get what you believe is a valuable thing out into the hands and the ears and the eyes of people that would be inspired by it, then that communicates something. And so he helped me at least like pivot my perspective on marketing, because I always think of marketing as a dirty thing. It's kind of a dirty word.
Right. Because it's
maybe
sales.
too much.
You could just replace the word with sales.
Sales. Yeah.
Salesmanship. People don't like that.
But then what he did is he turned and he's like, no, there's actually a way of incorporating that as one of the fun and beautiful steps of the art production that an artist can partake in.
He's spot on. He's spot on with that. So you have to frame up how people hear it. They don't, so what's nice about having an audience that's excited about what you're doing is they frame it up for someone else. They tell you about what this band means to them, and then they put it on, right? Or like, oh, you're going to love this. And they set it up for the person. So that's the thing, is that people need to know what they're looking at and how to look at it too. So that's the other side of marketing, is that, for us, I use that word like gamifying, in the sense that, I want you to know we're talking about something different, and there is a code to crack, and that like actually some of our albums turned out to be pretty prescient, in the sense that what we decided to write about was major items in the news like the following year. So, I don't think of myself as a prophet, but I'm okay with like, teasing the audience with the idea that like, hey, we got some things right, like, and you might want to tune in, and there's reasons to listen even more than just, this is another band I like. So that's part of the thing too. I mean, everything you just discussed there, I think, is a really smart way of looking at it, because you don't have to be sleazy. Like, I mean, you don't want someone to have like buy something they don't like. I mean, that's not the plan, and you don't want to be vainglorious. So I think one of the ways that helps me frame it up too is that I try to talk about the things I'm a fan of. Like, here are the classic rock, concept albums I really love. And this is why I make concept albums, right? So it's not like I make concept albums because I think I'm awesome. It's like, I make concept albums because I've heard some awesome ones. And like, man, that really inspires me to make one. So you can talk about things that you love, or what you love about art, without having to talk about yourself and why you're great, and those kind of things bother you.
There's a ditch on the other side too, because you could be excessively bashful, let's say, and then you don't get it out there, and then you run the risk of it not reaching that person that would otherwise have been sparked by what you did, or could have changed their whole life. But because you didn't get it out there in a correct or a wide way, then they lost out because of that.
Yeah, well, bashful isn't humble. It's not the same thing. It's sometimes people are bashful because they think too much of themselves, and they're too worried about what people will think of them, so they don't do it. So that's it. I mean, you just have to, like, if you're going to give it a honest shot, you've just got to take your beatings. You're always going to have more reasons to give up than go on. Everything's going to be hard. When you finish, it's satisfying. When you finish and you love it and you show it to an audience and they don't, that's the worst feeling ever. And then you have to evaluate like what needs to change. What do I need to, how do I need to improve? Or maybe, maybe I was great in my high school, but maybe I'm not great on the college level. This is like one of the hard things to understand, because people would always talk to me, because I did a lot of work in Nashville, and they're like, hey man, I'm thinking about moving to Nashville. And I know this person. I'm like, they're not good enough to hang in Nashville. Like, I love them, they're a great person, and they might be one day, but they're not. And so I'm like, well, here's your plan. All right. Are you the best in your town? No. Okay. So what are the chances you're the best in Nashville? Like, why suddenly if you go there, are you going to be awesome? Right. So this is a fatal flaw of musicians too, and artists, is that like they don't do the work. They know they should practice more. They know they should try harder. They know they should do more work, and they just believe somehow it's going to magically work out. And this is the same with record contracts. Someone gives them record contracts. Like, that's a terrible contract. They're always terrible contracts, but they're got this weird disconnect. But if I signed it, it's all going to work out. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. So there's this delusion that people have too. So it's like, man, you got to, like, if you can't be like rise to the top in your local area, what makes you think you're going to move to the spot that everyone else who was at the top of their local area moved to? And you're going to, like, you didn't even qualify for the playoffs, and you're trying to play in the championship. So you gotta be realistic about it, and sometimes it's better to wait for everyone else to be yelling at you. Like, that's kind of my strategy. It's like, I kind of keep it on the down low until people are like, why aren't you doing this? And I'm like, all right, fine. Like that's like the 30th time I heard it. I think I'll go try it.
If you say so.
Yeah. So I do it the other way around. Maybe it's a little too much lag in it. That's
Did you
why
have any mentors or coaches or something like that was helping you along the way?
I wish I did. I had some
Sorry.
I had some really great music teachers along the way. One year, my ninth grade year, I had a really great music teacher who taught me like almost everything I knew about theory. By the time he was finished with me in a year, I was composing for orchestra. Like, so it was, and I started out barely knowing, like, just knowing a little bit of music theory and the general modes and like what to call chords. And so, yeah, but I mean, industry wise, no, because the music industry is loser on loser crime. And there's all these very smart talent. Well, it's all these very smart, talented people who would have done way better if they were trying to make money to get into banking or real estate or insurance or something, because you have these brilliant people that are participating in one of the most failure-driven systems ever. Like, so little of it ever works. And the problem is that the collateral damage is people and sensitive people and talented people. Like, I've seen so many talented people, they're the collateral damage to some stupid industry that couldn't figure out what to do with someone that was exceptionally good. They only knew how to smash people into the mold and what was going on. So yeah, I think it's like loser fest when I think about the music industry. I say it without resenting it. I don't resent it because I know better, right? And I don't participate in what they tell me to do or what they've suggested I do. And I'm happy to be where I'm at right now because I'm still growing. I feel like I'm still learning, and I don't think within the industry I would have had the opportunity to do that. So there are ways to go around it, especially nowadays. And you don't want to participate in a system where the best of them have a sub 100 batting average with people they actually turn out to make money. You know, and you look at their roster of all their successes, you're like, wow, look at these 12 huge bands. And it's like, go look at the vault of the other 300 bands.
There's just a wake.
Never came out. It's just like, and dude, like these people are just, absolutely devastated and don't know what to do with their lives once this fails because they own you forever. You can't go out and make money. It's like you're still giving them your money back if you start to make it. It's terrible. It's terrible. I hope I made that clear.
Well, you've also, in a way, offered up some hope because of all of the access to tools that, I don't know, like garage band musicians or gosh, even just home studio or home trailer musicians have, where they can do it, man. I love it, man. It's so great. So, like, what are some of the tools that have been helpful for you, or the platforms that have allowed you to reach the audience that you have?
Yeah, so we're entirely I don't know how to hack it better. I'm thinking about it now because like this album is like a really good chance for us to find new people because we've got all of our most popular songs on one record, and for considering the majority of the world has no clue who we are, that's a pretty solid record as far as I'm concerned. So because it's all new to them. I think about how to do it. So if I look at all of our analytics, the thing that's been best for us is getting added to other people adding us to playlists, or popular people who make playlists adding to us. So, that has been our number one thing, and fan recommendation.
Wait, clarify that for me. So like, if you were to be like, say on Spotify, there's people, maybe like Spotify DJs that get popular with making playlists and curating material.
So channels that make playlists, and YouTube, same thing. You get added to playlists, and then finally the other side of that is like, even like, so Pandora had one of the best recommendation engines. It actually, that format didn't really take off, but we found a lot of people through that because they would put us like with the best bands, and we've done well on that side. I think for people who listen to a lot of music, like at Spotify or Pandora, they like us for some reason because it's not like just another indie band, I guess. Like, I mean, I'm patting myself on the back here, but there are,
that's a fair description, I would say.
And so what we do is we seem to get recommended every time, like we get added to some, like, hot new artist playlist or something, like continually. So every time we put out a record or something new, it really gives us a boost. I don't know how to tell people to make that work for them. I think I think really one of the good things is like, if we want to talk just straight business talk, is growth partnerships, is being friends with other people that have an audience that might be overlap yours. So like, it was really great when Jonathan had me on his YouTube channel,
Oh yeah,
because
great talk.
like, of course, like, talk about quality viewers, all the people that came in to find us from the symbolic world actually knew what the heck we were talking about. It wasn't just,
Oh yeah, informed
lyrics that
fans.
rhyme.
Yeah.
Right. So they were informed fans. And then
Maybe they
Rod
came
Dreher
because they were expecting you to predict the future.
because of that title. Yeah, but I mean, Rod Dreher, author of The Benedict Option and Live Not by Lies, did a write-up about us, and all these people started pouring into our channels.
Right, because
like,
he was
hey,
also
Rod
a
said to
guest
hear this.
on Peugeot's channel too. So maybe there's
Yeah, and so
it all starts connecting.
growth partnerships might be good. Other bands like you can collaborate with that have an audience. It's always the problem is when you're starting out, you're always reaching upwards for help. But there are people that like to break new music out there, so pay attention for them and look for playlists you could get on. And I think that's key. You don't have to spend a ton of money. Like, we've never made an expensive music video ever. Like, that's probably hurt us to a degree, but at the same time, it's like, hey, I landed exactly where I hoped I would. I remember when I got married, like, I had this vision of the future that I would have a studio on my property, and like my kids would come over and sit on my lap, and Kate and I would work on stuff, and it would just be part of our lives, and my kids could grow up doing it, and that I wouldn't have to do anything else. And it's like, oh, cool. Like, that was my goal. It wasn't to take over the world or be famous. So, I mean, I'll keep pushing from here, but I mean, achievable. Like, I didn't do any of the things that people told me I had to do when it came to spending a ton of money on marketing or music videos, and I made all my records myself on a budget with real orchestral instruments and stuff. So it's possible if you're crazy enough, if you're willing to beat yourself up enough to get it done, you can do it. Yeah.
So what would be like one piece of advice for like you back in the day, say like in the early days of Dirt Poor Robins, that you would say, oh, you dummy, you should have done this instead? And then what's the one thing that you're like, that was a really good decision. I'm glad I did that.
Really good decision. I'll answer that backwards. So really good decision was deciding to opt out of the industry for me. Like, it's been so much lower stress. I'm the boss. I mean, so the downside of that is if something fails, it was your idea. So I had experiences where you're kind of trying to fit into a spot they want you to fit into. You're doing stuff you don't really feel great about, and it fails or it succeeds, and you're sad either way because you're bummed that someone's trying to sandwich you into something you didn't really see yourself as, and it fails. So like, well, that feels bad. Well, if it succeeds, it feels bad because it's not like what you wanted to do. So going around that was, I think, a really good decision for us and our sanity, and not pursuing fame. Okay, so the advice for someone starting out is, what
about the one where, okay, so the flip side of that is, what would you tell yourself in the earlier days?
Yeah,
that you
would tell myself, okay,
that was a bad decision. Why did you do that, dummy?
Okay. Don't worry about being cool. Be awesome. Don't be cool. Or be rare. Don't be cool. Okay. Because like, that's the thing, is that, an industry has opted for, like, it's easier to find a band that's cool than a band that's rare, right? Because you can't predict rare, and you don't know how the audience is going to receive it if you're a label. So you just try to plug someone into the thing they think is cool. So like, I would tell myself not to be cool, not to try hard. It took me a while. Well, it wasn't until I made Dirt Poor Robins where I learned to lay off the chops. And what that means is that, like, I grew up in the 80s and learned to play guitar very, very, very fast. Like,
so you would shred.
I would shred. I would tear people's heads off. I'd melt old ladies' faces at churches. So because you're always trying to be impressive, like a circus performer, right? And and my dad was funny because he was a really good radio announcer, and he listened to so much music, and he was like, dude, play tasty. And I was like, I hated that word. He said it. It was like, tasty. I want a tasty solo. I don't want this fast stuff. And it was like, but like, the problem was I could play anybody's stuff. Like, it didn't matter how fast it was. I could pick it up really at an early age and rip through it. So it was an easy way to be impressive. And then people stopped caring about that in the 90s. And I was like, oh dear, like, I can't wait for this to come back. I can't wait for this to come back, because now I'm just wearing my guitar low and slopping through chords like Nirvana. And by the time the 2000s started to roll around, I'd finally gotten over, like, the circus performer side of it. So I realized I wanted to be what I wanted to showcase is good decision making more than look at this guy's chops. Look at his chops. So that, and still you find though, eventually there's a situation where the music calls for it, right? So like Anthem to the Edge is this song and that we're putting out right now, and I kind of tear it up on the guitar at the end because it's like it starts to get kind of militant and it starts to move forward and things start to get chaotic, and it was like the best way to represent that. But I always want to make it, even if it's fast, I always want you to remember it and it to be memorable, and you could sing some aspect of it or anticipate it. Like it's not just random stuff. Like there's a solo by Eddie Van Halen in the song Beat It, and it's kind of great, but it's also kind of stupid, the solo, because it's just him doing every trick that he knows in one solo, and it's not really like a musical idea as much as it is just throwing mojo.
Yeah, like technical, I don't know, showing off or something.
It's cool. He sounds great, but I mean, so
it impresses like all of the 0.5% of lead guitarists that are listening,
Yeah. So I think that people should focus on learn all the techniques you can, so you don't have anything that you can't draw from when it's required. But doesn't mean you have to show people that you can do that either. Like they're not waiting to hear that how awesome you are. They want to be moved by the music. So that was something I wish I could have told like younger Neil. It's like, okay, listen, dude, okay, cool, that's fast. That's fast. Chill, dude. Play something I can remember.
You ever listen to Oscar Peterson, the piano player, jazz trio?
Yeah. Not a ton, but I'm not a huge jazz listener.
Aficionado. Yeah. So what I really liked about him is that he could play fast, man, and clean, like not sloppy boogie woogie, but clean. But there's clips of him you can find on YouTube where he hums what he's playing, the solo in the right hand. And so he's able to sing like a melody, even though his hands are like playing, 1,000 notes per second. It feels like it's melodic still.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's cool. So, but that's it. But people want they want to feel something, right? It is fun to go to the circus or Cirque du Soleil and watch like somebody do something that's incredibly hard to do. There is aspect of fun to that, but it doesn't like tell you anything about yourself either. It's like, wow, that's crazy. If I worked really hard, I could do that thing that I thought was crazy because someone worked really hard to do it. It's not like a story. And so Cirque du Soleil succeeded because they started mixing narratives within acrobatics. So, there's an overarching story that ties all of these things together. And so they have context, they're not just impressive things. So I think that's important.
Now, how about like final point? Because I think we're reaching the 2-hour mark. If we pass 2 hours, that actually make me very happy, because I'm really a big fan of long form. And
I know,
guys, I just listened to Jordan B. Peterson and Jocko's 2.5-hour talk.
Yeah,
I listened to that all the way through. They actually had some really good insights on marketing. And, anyway, so I guess the last question would be if you had any other general advice for people that are starting out.
Yeah, I mean, remember your first love. So why did you want to get into music? So for me, I remember being at a concert and I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm actually the memory for me, actually, I think that hit me the strongest. I was 4 and Dust in the Wind came on the radio. And it was like, it had a deeper meaning to it. If you listen to our band, it kind of makes sense. And I used to listen to Queen too when I was like 5. And so there was something about listening to music, the way it would like hit me. And it was like, man, there's something so much bigger going on than what's going on in my neighborhood in this world, right? Or in my house. And it was a little bit of an escape, but also like an escape to something real, like a bigger way of looking at the world. So you get into music and it's like, okay, I want to do that. I want to help people participate in that. I want to be able to make music. I want to hear myself, and I want to help people feel what I just felt. That's the right level to look at things, like, because if you start thinking about things like, I just know so many people that fall into this trap. They're just trying to hack their way into the industry. Like they realized they were good. They got to a point where they realized everybody else was good too. And it's like, okay, so who do we have to satisfy? They try to satisfy the industry. The industry is looking for more bands like this band. They're looking for more bands like this band. It's like, just focus straight on like what gets you interested in music and what gets an audience going. And you're gonna stand a way better chance of figuring out what it is you were made to do musically than if you. And that I think the profit might follow. So if it's really good, the profit might become or popularity might become an unintended side effect of doing something you loved and helping people find something they love. So I would say that focus on that, and don't forget it. People are going to try to tell you about how to careerify everything, and some of that's helpful, but most of it isn't, because you do have to. There is a way you could be financially sustainable. Like you might have to teach lessons while you do it, or you might have to work on other people's projects. Like that's fine, careerifying it. But like trying to become the next whoever, no, don't do that. Don't do it.
Cool. Any other announcements you want to leave people with?
No, follow us online. I love people. I try to interact with people as much as I can, especially.
What's the best place to interact with you these days?
You can go to dirtpoorrobins.com. The site's in transition because we're getting ready for the film, but you can find all of our socials there that you might be interested in, all of our records, all of our music. You can link to it from there. So dirtpoorrobins.com. That's Robins with one B, like the bird. Like Robin actually just moved under my studio, made a nest, and had babies. So it's like extra Dirt Poor Robin studio.
Yeah, I'd say. Yeah. Wow.
I'm not joking at all either. He gets mad at me all the time for playing music too loud. So
it's like, well, come on. If you decided to live here, after all, it's supposed to be some omen or something. You might as well enjoy it.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Maybe you could like bounce off. It's like, okay, does he like this song? That's
my process in a nutshell. I commune with this bird. I'm an augur. Hey, you know what an augur is?
I had a mentor, and he would test his pop music with kids. His, I think 6-year-old or something. He's like, hey, if they dance to it, if they engage with it, he's on the right track.
Well, he's got a point. We should have a conversation about that one day, because I think it's important. Because like as someone who's I haven't been a lifelong Christian. I'm an Orthodox Christian now, but as someone who like tries to participate in music, Christian music has never been interesting to me. Like outside of the stuff we actually sing that's old at church and liturgical. So there's a worthwhile discussion we could have one day talking about like what happened in the 20th century to Christian art. Like I would love to have a conversation with someone one day, because there's so much to say. And I think it's so helpful for anybody who's like me, who's like, well, they have this faith they want to incorporate in what they're doing, but they don't necessarily want to do.
How do you go about doing that?
Yeah, right. And it's like,
and then market it in a clean way, That's an
important discussion. So,
well, why don't we bookmark that one? And the third time we record a conversation, we'll just start there.
I always love talking to you. Ask great questions. I want to keep talking and talk over you, because you when you respond back, like you get me thinking immediately. So I think you do really. I really like the way you frame up an interview. It's great.
Well, I appreciate it, and
make sure you like and subscribe to his channel if you're watching this. Eric Fiedler, like and subscribe. Smash that like button.
Oh, the smash! I haven't brought myself to be able to say that yet. I'm like, that's just not me.
I know. I said it for you, so it's not your fault.
I kind of take like more of like the nonprofit approach, like if you want to see more of this valuable content reach other people, then please click
the word subscribe all the time.
Yeah. Oh, and then there's like the little PNG graphics that are happening underneath. Some people it's just like flash. Yeah. Do this.
You want more 2-hour rants from guys who work out of a trailer in Kentucky? Click subscribe now.
Oh yeah, that'll get him going.
Yeah, perfect.
Tomorrow goes without Christ.